So I've been the government's business champion for older workers for the last 3 years, and a few months ago I then took on the business champion role around the Aging Society Grand Challenge. So I'd like to cover 3 areas today. Firstly, cover a bit of context around age and business. Secondly, talk more about what we've done on older workers, the economic and business benefits, what's worked, and then expand that to talk a bit about the Aging Society Grand Challenge and some of my early thoughts there. Now, my government role is independent, so I'm allowed to say whatever I think, which is good. But I should emphasise that today in particular, that's what I'm doing. Because of the election and purdah, it's important I'm clear that anything I say today are personal views from my experience of business, and I'm not making recommendations for government. So they were keen that I made that clear, so I've made that clear, that's good. So the first area, age and business. The UK demographic is undergoing the most significant change in over 100 years. In the UK, 1 in 3 working age people are aged over 50. The first person who will live to 150 has already been born. At a time when most of us are living longer and healthier lives, we'll also need to work for longer to pay towards our pensions, health and care in older age. As a CEO and a businessman, I believe this change brings great opportunities. I passionately believe that inclusive and diverse businesses are better businesses, and I include age and multi-generational diversity within that. They make better decisions from a broader range of inputs. They better represent their customers, they better represent their communities. There's also a talent imperative for businesses. If you take the 7 years from 2018 to 2025, there's forecast to be 300,000 fewer under 30s working, and there's forecast to be 1 million more over 50s working. So over that 7-year period, 300,000 less under 30s, 1 million more over 50s. If businesses don't embrace a multi-generational workforce and don't embrace older workers, they really will struggle to get the skills and capabilities they need to succeed. From the individual's perspective, working over 50 helps to save for later life, remain active and connected, and enjoy the other benefits that good employment brings. For businesses relying on a shrinking number of older people will not be enough if companies want to succeed. The reason I took on the older worker role is because longer lives is something to be celebrated, in my view. It also causes a need for a change in our thinking. Now, let me kind of just contextualise that in society. I'll take you back to 1908, the year that the UK first introduced a form of state pension. It paid 5 shillings a week, 25 pence a week, and you had to be aged 70 or over to qualify. But back in 1908, life expectancy at birth was 51, so not many did. 40 years later, 1948, was the birth of the modern state pension. The state pension ages were set at 65 for men and 60 for women, and back in 1948, life expectancy at birth was 68. For more than 50 years, nothing changed. Then in 2010, state pension ages started changing. The female state pension age began to rise, reaching equality with men last year in 2018. And here we are today in 2019 with life expectancy at birth of 82. Yet despite this increase in both life expectancy and the state pension age, research shows that there are over 1 million over 50s in the UK who want to work but are being shut out of job opportunities. So that brings me neatly onto the second area I want to talk about, older workers. And I'd like to talk more about the financial benefits to the economy and to businesses, and then highlight some of the proven interventions that I've seen in my role as business champion. So the economy. Research by the National Institute for Economic and Social Research shows that longer working lives could result in increased GDP, tax revenue, and household consumption. Added to that, there'll be a decrease in government expenditure. So their research suggests that 1 year added to everyone's working life could increase GDP by 1% per year, which is equivalent to more than £20 billion. That's a massive increase to GDP. Businesses also benefit. Recent studies from McKinsey and others have incontrovertibly demonstrated that companies with a diverse workforce are more likely to succeed. I've got 3 percentages for you: 21%, 33%, 87%. So 21%. Businesses that have a healthy balance of men and women are 21% more likely to outperform their competitors. Pretty compelling. Most businesses would do something that gave them a 5% chance of outperforming competitors, 21% from gender balance. 33%, businesses with a good mix of ethnic backgrounds are 33% more likely to outperform their competitors. But then 87% is how it compounds. Now, teams that are gender, age, and ethnically diverse make better decisions up to 87% of the time. In short, there is now both an economic and a business imperative for a focus on age diversity. A person aged over 50 who becomes unemployed is less likely to be able to get another job than any other age group, and yet they're just as likely as younger people to look for another job after they lose one, demonstrating their desire to continue working. So what about proven interventions that make the difference? We may buy the need to change, but how do we make this happen in practice? Rhetoric doesn't change things, action does. I set a target of 1 million more over 50s in good employment by 2022, and the good news is we're on track to achieve that. More over 50s in work in the UK than ever before, 10.5 million. More over 65s in work in the UK than ever before, 1.3 million. And over 50s are by far the fastest growing working age demographic in the UK. So I want to move on to some specific examples that I've seen working in the past couple of years that are making that difference. And we call it the 3 R's. 1, recruit, 2, retain, and 3, retrain. So let's start off firstly with recruit. What's critical here is to address the barriers to the recruitment of people aged over 50. One of the most shocking things I've seen is research done by Anglia Ruskin University. What they basically did was create 1,800 CVs where there were pairs of CVs that were identical in terms of a very broad range of skills and experience that the candidates have. One of the CVs, they left all the dates in. The other CV, identical other than taking all the dates out. So otherwise identical, good broad range of experience. They then sent the CVs out, as I say, to 1,800 different employers. And on the CVs where it was clear that the age of the individual, so for women over 50, they were 6 times less likely to get an interview, and the men that were clearly over 50, 4 times less likely to get an interview than the CV where the ages weren't clear. I'm not talking 60% and 40%, I'm talking 600% and 400%. Really troubling. But what do we do about it? Well, the key actions I've seen employers take, and I've seen work in the past, are 3 things in terms of recruitment. Firstly, ensure everyone involved in recruitment receives training and knows that ageism and other biases are endemic, so that needs to be addressed. Secondly, check that the imagery and wording is age inclusive. I looked at this at Aviva, my former employer, and I looked at our recruitment and the ads were fantastic. All the imagery was fantastic from a gender diversity perspective, fantastic from an ethnic diversity perspective, not a single grey hair in sight on any of these adverts. We changed that, we just changed some of the wording. In 1 year, we had a 36% increase in the number of over 50s we recruited into the organisation. Dead easy to do, simple action. And then thirdly, offer flexible working from day one. If companies want to fish in the biggest talent pools, they need to remove all the potential barriers to talent applying. It's just good sense to do so. Secondly, retain. Key actions here. I would say establish carer leave and tailored benefits. Caring needs is one of the biggest reasons for involuntary exit from the labour market. 1 in 4 women over 50 have significant caring responsibilities, 1 in 8 men. And the analogy I always draw is if anyone heard of a business that said to a pregnant woman, it's fine to have the day off to have the baby as long as you're in the day before and the day after, we'd all be horrified. Yeah? We'd be absolutely horrified. And that's basically what the majority of businesses are saying to over 50s that suddenly get significant caring responsibilities for an equally dependent human being. It just happens to be an elderly relative rather than a baby. So have formal caring policies is really, really critical. Secondly, encourage flexibility and adaptations in work. Great example here. Jaguar Land Rover had an ageing workforce. They found that skilled but ageing workforce was struggling on a shop floor that had been designed for younger workers. So they made a number of simple adaptations to their production line and significantly improved the retention of their workforce. And then the third area of focus around retraining. So 3 key actions here I've seen working. Firstly, introducing midlife career reviews. There are 3 pillars to these: a review of an individual's wealth, health and career. There's various models out there, but they all involve some form of personal review and mid-career point between ages 45 and 55 to enable a conversation around what this second half of working life might look like. Because typically, people in this group may well have 20 years of working life ahead of them. What might work for them? It could be aspirations for promotion, desire to move into a different role, or to make changes within their role. For the employee, it allows personal reflection and planning. For the employer, it's a key element of retention and workforce planning. Secondly, I'd like to see businesses promote apprenticeships to all ages. In theory, apprenticeships are open to all, but most of the publicity material is exclusively youth-focused. Promote the availability of them as a way of retraining, I think, is key. And then thirdly, ensuring training and development is open to all. Again, if I look at the data, and I'd encourage any organisation to do this, look at the data of what goes on in your organisation. When we looked at this at Aviva, we discovered that over 50s were 25% less likely to have a career development conversation with their manager than someone under 50. Managers were basically assuming that the development just wasn't wanted, and that's not the case at all. Over a couple of years, we brought that percentage down significantly, but the assumption is rooted in the bias I've already talked about, and it takes active interventions to overcome this. So these are all actions that have worked for various companies, and there's plenty more case studies and further information freely available from the business in the community team that work on all of this. So let me move on to the third area I want to cover, and the wider ageing society grand challenge. As I say, I've done the older worker business champion role for 3 years. I've taken on the industrial strategy ageing society grand challenge role for the last 4 months. So given it's a relatively new appointment, and given the current PERDA we're in pre-election, I can't talk about what my recommendations or views might be to government, but what I can talk about is firstly, what the ageing society grand challenge is wanting to achieve, and secondly, my early thoughts on where businesses can assist. So the overall ambition for the Ageing Society Grand Challenge is to ensure people can enjoy at least 5 years extra healthy, independent life by 2035, while also narrowing the gap between the experience of the richest and poorest. And this aligns well with my personal business purpose, if you like. The reason that gets me out of bed each morning is I want to help people in the UK enjoy a secure, healthy and prosperous retirement. So the ambition here is a huge one, but a big ambition is what the scale of our demographic change requires. And that ambition is then broken down under 4 broad pillars. Firstly, health and social care. Secondly, homes, family and communities. Thirdly, products and services. And finally, work and purpose, which I've already covered in terms of the older workers. So let me talk a little bit about the other 3. And I should say, Andrew, I'm really appreciative of the work that you and many others in the room have done in this field. Bringing this forum together is absolutely fantastic, and I think it really is starting to build some momentum around this critical topic. As I said a moment ago, my thoughts on this are still evolving, but I will talk about some of the early and initial ideas. So starting off with health and social care. I do think social care and how to solve it is to a significant degree a political issue, so I won't make any specific comments there, but just an observation. Roughly half of social care in the UK is self-funded, and a large proportion of self-care is provided by the private sector. But if you look at where in the private sector, the vast majority of that is private equity backed. Generally, private equity is focused on short-term type capital opportunities. For me, this is very much a long-term game. Why can't we, how do we go about, is the key question for me, how do we go about getting longer-term private capital invested in the social care system in building long-term solutions in that market? Second area, homes, family and communities. And there's a clear problem here. Over 90% of over 65s in the UK are living in mainstream housing. However, around a third of them would like to live in more suitable housing. Poor housing of older people accounts for over £600 million a year of cost to the NHS. And for individuals, poor housing results in higher bills, social isolation and depression. In the UK, only 0.5% of our housing stock is suitable for assisted living. In the US, it's over, and Australia and New Zealand, all of those, it's over 5%. So 0.5% in the UK, over 5% in US, Australia and New Zealand. And as someone who spent the last 2 days moving my 86-year-old mother for the first time into an assisted living place, I can tell you how happy and relaxed she looked as I left her last night, having moved in, just knowing she had that support infrastructure around her. So where I think we need to get to is an increase in homes suitable for assisted living, a reduction in isolation, and cohesive, inclusive and connected communities. And I guess my question here is, with $15 trillion of negative yielding capital globally, how do we attract this capital to improve our housing stock in the UK, both new and existing housing stock? And then products and services. For me, the business case of why businesses should target consumers aged 50 to 75 is overwhelming. Consumers aged 50 to 75 represent over half of consumer spending and over 3/4 of the wealth. And yet far too many companies remain obsessed with millennials and Generation Z. So my questions here are, how do we build the business case for innovation targeting consumers aged 50 to 75? And specifically, how do we get entrepreneurs and digital innovation focused on this segment? Initially in the UK, but then from there, how do we make the UK a leader in products and services for over 50s on a global stage? So finally, to summarise, there is a business imperative. Inclusive and diverse businesses are better businesses, and within that, multi-generational businesses are better businesses. Far more older workers are leaving the workforce each year through the ageing population, as far more than the number of younger people coming into the workforce through the education system. So businesses, if they want the skills and capabilities they need for their businesses going forward, it's going to be imperative they embrace more older workers. And over 50s, as I say, represent 50% of consumer spending, 75% of wealth. So having made the case of why a consideration of age is beneficial to businesses, it's then going to take tangible action to make it happen. Through my work with business in the community, with business organisations and with large employers, we have started to see this happen. We set a target of 1 million more over 50s working over a 5-year period. And if you think about that 1 million more, basically just the demographics alone would have led to about 200,000 more over that 5-year period if employment participation rates stayed about the same. So the other 800,000 of growth needs to come from improving the participation rates of over 50s in work. And the good news is halfway through that period, we're on track, so the action's working. But that's just the work and purpose stream of the Age and Society Grand Challenge, and there's still a lot more we can do on that before we start to look at the opportunities in health and social care, in housing, and in products and services, all of which will be great for the over 50s, hugely beneficial for businesses, and very accretive for the UK economy as a whole. Thank you.